hard to breathe when all we know is the struggle of staying above the rising water line. Well, the sky is finally open, the rain and wind stop blowing, but you're stuck out in the same old storm again. You hold tight to your umbrella, darling, I'm just trying to tell ya that there's always been a rainbow hanging over your head. If you could see what I see, you'd be blinded by the colors, yellow, red, and orange, and green, and at least a million others. So tie up your bow, take off your coat, and take a look around. 'Cause the sky is finally open, the rain and wind stop blowing, but you're stuck out in the same old storm again. You hold tight to your umbrella, darling, I'm just trying to tell ya that there's always been a rainbow hanging over your head. Well, tie up your bow, take off your coat, and take a look around. Everything is alright, 'cause the sky is finally open, the rain and wind stop blowing, but you're stuck out in that same old storm again. Let go of your umbrella, darling, I'm just trying to tell ya that there's always been a rainbow hanging over your head. Yeah, there's always been a rainbow hanging over your head.
So as we heard Rainbow this morning from Maggie, it was hard to hear that song and not think at least a little bit about the story of Noah, especially the way the song starts. She sings, "When it rains, it pours, but you didn't even notice. It ain't raining anymore. It's hard to breathe when all we know is the struggle of staying above the rising water line. Well, the sky is finally open. The rain and wind stopped blowing." Now, if you recall the story of the flood from the days that you were in Sunday school, or heck, even if you didn't grow up in Sunday school, chances are you probably know the story at least a little bit. You might remember that all of that came about because the creation, which God had declared entirely good at its inception, had been so corrupted. Not by mosquitoes, not by kudzu, not even by tricky snakes, but so corrupted by humanity, and especially humanity's violence toward each other, that God actually regretted making it all. So God, in essence, decided to etch-a-sketch it, to just wipe it all clean, and to start again with Noah and his family and the animals. In the creation poem at the beginning of the Bible, we hear that one of the mighty acts of creation was when God separated the waters from the ground of the earth. So in the flood, God is kind of reversing that order of creation. And then after the flood, God comes back to restore order out of the chaos, to bring life out of death, and to begin a new act of creation. And we find this in Genesis chapters 8 and 9. And I'm going to start with 8, verse 13. In Noah's 601st year, on the first day of the first month, the waters dried up from the earth. Noah removed the ark's hatch and saw that the surface of the fertile land had dried up. In the second month, on the 17th day, the earth was dry. God spoke to Noah, "Go out of the ark, you and your wife, your sons and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you all the animals of every kind, birds, livestock, everything crawling on the ground, so that they may populate the earth, be fertile, and multiply on the earth." So Noah went out of the ark with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives. All the animals, all the livestock, all the birds, and everything crawling on the ground came out of the ark by their families. God said to Noah and to his sons with him, "I am now setting up my covenant with you, with your descendants, and with every living being with you, with the birds, with the large animals, and with all the animals of the earth, leaving the ark with you. I will set up my covenant so that never again will all life be cut off by floodwaters. There will never again be a flood to destroy the earth." God said, "This is the symbol of the covenant that I am drawing up between me and you and every living thing with you, on behalf of every future generation. I have placed my bow in the clouds. It will be the symbol of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember the covenant between me and you and every living being among all the creatures. Floodwaters will never again destroy all creatures. The bow will be in the clouds, and upon seeing it, I will remember the enduring covenant between God and every living being of all the earth's creatures." God said to Noah, "This is the symbol of the covenant that I have set up between me and all creatures on earth." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So God announces to Noah the good news. The good news that never again will there be such a great flood, a flood that would come and just destroy all of the earth. And just to make it clear that this is not only a bargain between the two of them, God commits through the rainbow, a great visual display that everyone can see as the sign of that covenant. And because it is for every generation, we are parties to this covenant as well. We reap its benefits. But the commitment in that covenant is unilateral. It is an act of God's love and mercy alone. It lets all of us know that the ultimate outcome for life on earth is not a great disaster, but the great promise of God. So the catastrophe is behind us, right? It is what all of life on earth has been saved from. And yet sometimes it doesn't really feel like that, does it? After all, new evidence seems to appear almost every day of the consequences of our behavior and the effects our actions have on God's good creation, reminding us that great catastrophes are still in store for us if we don't make changes to the way we live. Killer heat waves, massive flooding, stronger and more violent storms all point toward a great potential for human suffering and suffering for all of creation. And for those who are too impatient to wait for environmental devastation, there are also those who seem eager to trigger the next war. Fear and distrust build up to the point where things seem like they're just about to boil over. And none of the conversation anymore seems to be about how to reduce the number of arms that we have or about how to build up a lasting peace, but rather how to build more and more powerful weapons. And you combine that with constant worry about the economy, the anxiety about when the next recession might come and what effect that might have on our kids and our grandkids. And catastrophe always seems to be lurking nearby. And what we realize is that the flood is not so much behind us as it is always with us. The disaster that Genesis speaks of is not only a one-time event in the past, but like many passages throughout the Bible, it has layers of meaning. And this story also speaks to the truth of our enduring human fears. The fears that stick with us, the anxiety that grabs a hold of us. From ancient times all the way until today, we have always been haunted by the specter of extinction. Whether it comes through something of our own making or whether it comes by something entirely beyond our own control. And yet, even if we've learned to live with that, even if we've learned to look past those large, cosmic, life-altering threats, we still feel unnerved by the smaller life-altering threats, the existential, small-scale peril, the storms of life that come our way, broken relationships, grief over the death of a loved one, illness, or even the feeling that life just isn't going anywhere. So what do we do when those storms of life come? Well, we hide under our umbrellas. We retreat into the safety of the arks of our own making. Starting in 2007, the American Psychological Association began publishing an annual report about stress, about what the stress levels were in our country. And yes, you can pretty much guess that the stress levels of Americans tend to be a little higher than in other developed countries. But the good news of that study was that they found that Americans seemed to be getting better at dealing with it. And for 10 years, those stress levels dropped every single year. And then in January of 2017, they noted the first significant increase in the history of their study. And the main culprit, as you can guess, was political division. 57% of the people who were surveyed said that it was a very significant or somewhat significant factor in their stress. As we struggle with profound differences in values and in our ideas of who we are supposed to be as a nation, it's no longer so clear to us that the things that unite us are greater than the things that divide us. And then to follow that up, in 2018, the report came out and it found that 39% of people were even more stressed than they were the year before. And then another 39% said they were just as stressed. Of course, there were lots of reasons to go around. People constantly are concerned with how to keep themselves or their families safe. They're concerned with their health. They have concerns about finances. And of course, there's always politics and interpersonal relationships. In other words, the storms of life, the threats to our existence, to life the way that we want it to be. So what do? We hide under our umbrellas. We shut ourselves away in our arks. We employ coping mechanisms to get by. Now, coping mechanisms are those things that we use when life comes at us hard, when we are experiencing trauma or great stress. They're strategies that we employ to manage the pain and to mitigate the damage that those hard times have on us. And coping mechanisms in and of themselves are not a bad thing. In fact, they can be great sources of comfort and healing when we employ the right ones. For instance, if you're feeling lonely, you might take the time to seek out and make new friends. Or you might gather with friends for support, people who already support and love you whenever you're hurting. If you're feeling particularly anxious or troubled, you may spend extra time in prayer or meditation. Or you might be one of those people who gets out your stress through physical activity. Or you might practice yoga or breathing techniques. There are other people who turn to music or travel or entertainment. However, we also know, without the psychologist telling us, that there are bad coping mechanisms. Psychologists label these as maladaptive. In other words, not good for you. Right? It's those coping mechanisms that instead of seeking out friends when you're lonely, that you seek to escape, to withdraw from all other people and put a barrier up between you and them. It's that impulse that instead of turning to prayer and meditation, you turn instead to overuse of drugs and alcohol to try to numb the pain instead of actually dealing with it. Or instead of turning to good things like exercise or travel, you engage in dicey activities like gambling or risky sexual behavior or even some kind of self-harm. And I get it. I do. I mean, we all want to hide away sometimes. We all want to escape from the pain. And that's okay. It is. We're supposed to give ourselves a break every now and then, to offer ourselves some grace. Because there are going to be occasions when we just can't think straight, when we can't see clearly the way ahead of us, and we need time to figure things out. But at some point, like the song says, you're going to have to let go of your umbrella, or you're never going to see the rainbow overhead. You're never going to experience that great grace and beauty that comes through by having made it through the storms of life and coming out safe on the other side. Because remember, the storm is always only temporary. And things are rarely as bad as our runaway imaginations have led us to believe. This week I was reminded of the truth of that when a friend of mine shared a poem by Danusha Lamaris. It's called Small Kindnesses, and some of you might have seen it too. I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by. Or how strangers still say, "bless you," when someone sneezes. A leftover from the bubonic plague. "Don't die," we are saying. And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly, we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it. To smile at them and for them to smile back. For the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder. And for the driver in the red pickup truck to let us pass. We have so little of each other now. So far from tribe and fire. Only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy, these fleeting temples we make together when we say, "Here, have my seat. Go ahead, you first." Or, "I like your hat." What this is trying to say here, and I think what the biblical story of Noah is trying to teach us, or at least one of the things it's trying to teach us, is that the God who created the world does not let it completely drown. God always saves it. God always preserves what is good and makes plans to multiply it for the flourishing of all creation. So this world in which we live, a world which I know always seems to be teetering on the brink of destruction, or your life that may at times seem like it's on the verge of disaster, all of that is already saved. In the story of the flood, God only wipes out what makes life unbearable so we can have a new beginning, a fresh start. In fact, the rainbow itself is a sign of the new beginning. It is a symbol of God switching from one way of dealing with people to dealing with people in a more merciful way. God, portrayed as a mighty warrior, makes the conscious choice to set down his bow, to lay it in the clouds, to lay aside the weapon of mass destruction. And he becomes instead the God who Jesus says sends the rain upon both the just and the unjust, who makes the sun rise upon the evil and the good. You know, we might look at the rainbow and take all the colors of the rainbow to show us the infinite resources of God's love. Because God will find a way of conquering evil without waging war. God is shifting away from old ways of dealing with problems to living out new ways. Instead of destruction, God is intent on building up a new creation. And in doing so, God is setting a model for us to follow as well. For us to lay aside our own habitual ways of dealing with things, our violent, self-harming ways of dealing with pain and problems, and instead to seek to live into a new covenant that blesses all of creation, that blesses every single person. Because we all know the storms of life will come. They will. The earth will shake, and chaos will just seem to break loose at times. But the storms will always stop eventually. If we don't let go of our umbrella or come out of the ark, we won't be able to join in with the new thing that God is doing. After all, the rainbow is not the end of God's graciousness. It's the first chapter of our new beginning. Let us pray. As we bow our heads and open up our hearts to God, and we take a look inside, ask yourself, what umbrella am I holding on to? What am I holding on to so tightly that it keeps me from seeing the beauty that God is creating throughout the earth around me? Almighty God, who loves us and who makes all things new, we offer to you those things that separate us. And pray that you would give us grace to accept your invitation and to become co-creators in this new life that you are building, in this kingdom where all things shall be well. We offer these to you as we offer our prayers. In Jesus' name, amen. As we sing our hymn of invitation today,